Hello, I'm Elise Vance, the author of the channel Borrowed Lives, and I offer you fascinating stories. Like and subscribe to my channel.
I've possessed a strange curse or gift since I was little. I can hear the inner thoughts of people's shadows. When I was young, my father and stepmother wrote me off as a pathological liar just seeking attention. My stepsister, Clara, branded me an outcast and turned everyone at school against me. Years later, Clara managed to charm the city's most influential tech mogul and billionaire investor, Julian Vance. But right before their grand engagement party, Julian suffered a mysterious stroke during a board meeting and fell into a coma. When he finally woke up, his mind was severely damaged. His memory was completely reset to when he was an 8-year-old child. Clara instantly canceled the engagement without a second thought. Marry a child in a man's body? Absolutely not. I'd rather be bankrupt, she spat. Downstairs, Julian's high-powered legal team and security detail were pressing my father for answers. My father was practically pale with dread. But right at that moment, I happened to glance at the silhouette cast by Julian's shadow on the wall, and I heard it speak. That fake snake Clara, the shadow growled. The top neurologists already said my memory loss is temporary. With proper care and mental stimulation, I'll fully recover in just 90 days. I literally transferred a private super yacht and a luxury penthouse into her name as a wedding surprise. Guess she just threw that away. Once my head clears, I'm going to ruin her career completely. When I heard about the penthouse and the yacht, my eyes widened. Opportunities like this didn't come twice. I stepped forward and told my father calmly, "Dad, I'll step in. I'm willing to marry Julian in her place." Clara, who had spent her entire life tearing me down, sprinted over and threw her arms around me the second she heard my offer. "Evelyn, you're really willing to do this?" I nodded slowly. She squeezed me tightly, a smug grin spreading across her face. "Well, it's about time. I've always been so good to you, taking care of you when we were kids. It's only right that you step up for the family now. Besides, it's not like any high society guy would ever look at you anyway. Even if Julian is mentally 8 years old, he's still gorgeous and built like a model. You're actually getting a step up." She cast a fleeting, greedy glance at Julian, who was sitting quietly near the doorway, and bit her lip. Honestly, it's almost a shame to let him go. I pushed her away, not bothering to argue. Escaping this toxic house while securing a luxury penthouse and a yacht? I wasn't losing a single thing. But beside us, Julian's shadow was practically writhing in absolute fury. "Clara, you evil hypocrite. You always pretended to be the sweet, innocent sister while framing Evelyn for everything. If I wasn't bound to this physical body right now, I'd expose every single bribe and lie you've ever told." I brushed off my jacket, walked downstairs, and greeted Julian's mother, Mrs. Vance, offering her a glass of water. "Mrs. Vance, I'm the eldest daughter of the family. If it helps protect your family's standing, I am ready to marry Julian today." Mrs. Vance's face was etched with anxiety. Julian's company was in the middle of a massive corporate merger. If news broke that his fiancé dumped him because of a brain injury, rival executives would swarm the company, tank the stock, and execute a hostile takeover. My sudden proposal was a miracle lifeline for her. She grabbed my hands with tears in her eyes. "Are you truly sure, Evelyn? Julian hasn't recovered his memory, so we can't host a proper public ceremony right now. But if you take good care of him and stand by him, once he recovers, I promise to reward you beyond your wildest dreams." I offered a respectful nod. I'm very patient, and I've been taking care of myself since I was 15, working evening shifts to pay for my university degree. Julian's shadow gasped in genuine shock. Wait, her family is loaded. Why on earth did she have to work evening shifts just to pay for college? What kind of monsters are these people? I ignored the shadow's outburst and continued demonstrating my value to Mrs. Vance. I also studied architecture and literature, so I have plenty of patience for caretaking. My stepmother quickly chimed in with a fake, forced smile. "Oh, absolutely. Evelyn was practically made for servitude. She handles all the cooking and deep cleaning around here anyway. Sending her to look after Julian is a perfect match. Please, take her right now." My stepmother essentially kicked me out the door like a bag of trash, unable to hide her eagerness to be rid of me. My father, true to form, stood by silently and let her push me around without a word. Mrs. Vance smiled softly, stood up, and took my hands. "Come with us, my dear. Don't worry about packing any luggage. I'll have the staff purchase an entire new wardrobe for you." Just then, Julian stepped forward on his own. He grabbed my sleeve with both hands, looking up with wide, innocent eyes. "You're my new wife. You have to come play video games with me." As I walked out the front door, Clara's shrill, mocking laughter echoed behind us. A weirdo and a man-child. What a match made in heaven. Julian's shadow shook its fists in the air, cursing aloud. "Just you wait, Clara. The second my memory returns, I'm transferring $10 million directly into Evelyn's personal bank account just to watch your face turn blue." When we arrived at the Vance estate, Mrs. Vance wiped away a quiet tear. "The stroke left severe trauma. It's a miracle he's walking, but the specialists say that with genuine care, affection, and low stress, his memory should fully return within 3 months. However, if he suffers another severe shock, the damage could become permanent." I was going to explain this to Clara, but she was so cold-hearted she wouldn't even let me finish. "Evelyn, please, make sure nothing triggers him." What Mrs. Vance was really asking was for me to be his emotional anchor. At the same time, Julian's state had to be kept strictly secret from the corporate board. With competitors trying to seize control of the Vance empire, she needed someone she could trust implicitly to stay by his side around the clock. Julian's shadow let out a heavy sigh. I really thought Clara was the one who would stand by me through thick and thin. My heart is completely broken. I wonder if Evelyn is going to be just as fake. I offered a gentle smile, taking Julian, who currently had the mind of an 8-year-old, up to the private study. "Didn't you say you wanted to play video games with me?" "Yes." Julian, standing at 6'2" with broad shoulders, flashed a bright, childlike grin. I tapped his shoulder gently. "I'll play with you, but on one condition. After every level we complete, you have to let me read a chapter of a book to you." This was part of the neurologist's recommendation. Reading corporate reports, market trends, and economic history to him would help stimulate his damaged brain pathways. Julian's shadow hummed in approval. "Well, look at that. She's actually taking this seriously. Much more reliable than Clara, but I'm still keeping my guard up." Over the next few weeks, I played games with him, patiently let him win, and then spent hours reading financial news and architectural history aloud. Clara could barely read a full article without getting distracted, the shadow noted one evening. "I didn't expect Evelyn to be so sharp. She actually understands international market trends. I wonder what else she's hiding." I hid a subtle smile. Step by step, I was earning his underlying trust. Within a month, Julian showed rapid signs of progress, though his cognitive state was fluctuating wildly. Sometimes he acted like a child, other times, his adult instincts would briefly surface, leaving him disoriented and defensive. One afternoon, after I finished drying my hair, he suddenly walked into the room with a sharp, commanding gaze. "Who are you? What are you doing in my private suite?" I froze, remembering the doctor's warning that sudden stress could cause a permanent setback. Before I could speak, he grabbed my wrist tightly. His shadow panicked, waving its arms frantically. "You idiot. That's your wife. Release her wrist right now, you're hurting her." I kept my voice soft and calm. "I'm the new personal assistant your mother hired. My family disowned me, and Mrs. Vance was kind enough to give me a job. Please don't dismiss me, I have nowhere else to go." Julian's intense glare softened slightly. He released my wrist and cleared his throat. "This is my private space. Don't enter without permission again." His shadow rolled its eyes in frustration. "If you don't know how to speak nicely, just keep your mouth shut. That's your wife. One day, you're going to be begging her for a proper wedding." Hearing the shadow's words, vivid images of a real wedding and a peaceful future flashed through my mind, making my face burn red. I quickly bowed my head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. I won't cross the boundary again." A few days later, during a routine medical evaluation, the head specialist pulled Mrs. Vance aside, visibly thrilled. Mr. Vance's neural pathways are repairing remarkably fast. The cognitive fluctuations should stabilize within a week. Mrs. Vance squeezed my hands tightly, her eyes overflowing with gratitude. Thank you, Evelyn. Once he fully recovers next week, I'm hosting a massive press gala to show our investors and board members that Julian is in prime shape. Unsurprisingly, news of Julian's imminent recovery leaked to Clara. One afternoon, she barged into the estate gardens while Julian was busy painting on the lawn. She dragged me roughly into a secluded pavilion. I heard Julian's memory is coming back, she sneered, glancing toward him with greed in her eyes. He still looks like a brain-damaged toddler to me. I crossed my arms. Why do you care so much about my husband? Clara's face contorted, and she slapped me hard across the cheek. Your husband. Know your place. I'm the woman Julian actually loves. Once his memory returns, you better pack your cheap bags and crawl back into the gutter. In the distance, Julian's shadow saw the physical strike and went absolutely feral. How dare you lay a hand on Evelyn, you viper? Evelyn hit her back. Once I'm back in my right mind, Clara is dead to me. The only wife I'll ever acknowledge is Evelyn. Then the shadow paused, suddenly pacing nervously. Wait, what if my conscious mind forgets these past few weeks? What if my body wakes up thinking Clara was the one nursing me back to health? I'm just a shadow. How do I warn myself? Rubbing my burning cheek, anxiety settled in my stomach. If Julian woke up and fell for Clara's manipulation again, not only would my penthouse and yacht evaporate, but Clara would spend the rest of her life trying to ruin me. The shadow snapped its fingers. Wait, my mother knows the truth. She knows Clara abandoned me and that Evelyn is my real wife. Mom won't let Clara pull this off. But Clara had already anticipated that. She immediately ran to Mrs. Vance, dropping to her knees and sobbing hysterically. Auntie Vance, you know how much I love Julian. I only broke off the arrangement because my parents threatened to disown me. Please, give me another chance to take care of him. To my absolute horror, Mrs. Vance, terrified of any public controversy before the corporate merger, actually hesitated. She pulled me aside later, looking deeply conflicted. Evelyn, you've been wonderful, but Julian loved Clara before his injury. Maybe she really was pressured by her parents. What if we let her back into his life? I'll make sure you get a massive cash settlement and a luxury villa. Seeing me nod quietly, Julian's shadow practically exploded in frustration. Evelyn, where is your spine? Why are you giving away your hard work to a snake? I suppressed a bitter sigh. If Julian genuinely preferred Clara, what was the point of fighting? I might as well take the cash settlement and build a peaceful life far away from all of them. Clara, capitalizing on Mrs. Vance's hesitation, leaks a false story to the press that evening. Billionaire Julian Vance to remarry longtime love Clara next month. When the day of Julian's final medical assessment arrived, the atmosphere in the private clinic was suffocatingly tense. The neurologist conducted the final tests behind closed doors. Outside, the shadow paced back and forth across the floor. Please, brain, remember Evelyn. Remember who actually stayed. Clara stood beside me in a designer dress, whispering malicious insults. Enjoy your final minutes as a Vance outcast. Finally, the doors opened. Julian walked out. His demeanor was completely transformed, his posture was rigid, his gaze sharp, cold, and calculating. The childlike warmth was entirely gone. My heart sank. He doesn't remember me. Clara immediately rushed forward, throwing her arms wide. Julian, you're back. It's me, Clara, your soulmate. You have no idea how terrified I've been these past 3 months. Dejected, I turned my head, ready to walk away. Don't touch me, a cold, deep voice cut through the hallway. My wife is Evelyn. The hallway went completely silent. Clara's hands froze midair, her fake smile instantly fracturing. The tears she had so carefully prepared welled up in her eyes, unable to fall. I froze in my tracks. For a split second, I thought my ears were deceiving me. Julian stood framed by the doorway, tall, formidable, and entirely awake. The vulnerability of the past few months had vanished from his eyes, replaced by the commanding presence of a man who controlled an empire. But as his sharp gaze swept across the corridor and landed on me, the coldness melted just a fraction. "Evelyn, come here." Behind him, Julian's shadow was practically leaping off the wall in absolute celebration. Finally, the brain woke up with a conscience. "Physical body, I officially retract 80% of the insults I threw at you." My eyes stung with sudden moisture. Clara turned ghostly white, stuttering desperately. Julian, you must still be disoriented. I'm Clara, the woman you loved. Evelyn took advantage of your condition to manipulate you." Julian didn't even look at her outstretched hand. "Step back." 2 words. No raised voice, no dramatic shouting, yet Clara flinched as if a physical barrier had just slammed down between them. Mrs. Vance stood frozen near the doctor, her face draining of color as shame washed over her features. Clara shook her head wildly. "No, this is wrong. The doctor said your mind would be unstable. She tricked you." While I was recovering, Julian's calm voice cut through her panic. "Evelyn read corporate reports to me every single night. She kept me grounded when my mind reverted to childhood. She explained things to me patiently when I couldn't understand. And when my memory fractured and I treated her like a stranger, she quietly called herself an assistant just to keep me calm." My fingers tightened around the strap of my bag. I remembered that afternoon in the private bathroom, the terror of potentially causing him a permanent setback, the way I had bowed my head and endured his hostility. Julian's eyes darkened as his gaze landed on my left cheek, where the faint outline of Clara's slap was still visible. She protected my health when even I couldn't. "And she suffered physical violence because you struck her." Clara backed up, trembling. "That was just a sisterly disagreement." "No," Julian stepped forward, his shadow looming large against the wall. "That was a self-absorbed gold digger laying hands on my wife." His shadow gloated in total satisfaction. "Oh, that sounded so cool. Evelyn, please tell me he looked as cool as I think he did." A tiny, involuntary smile touched my lips. Julian caught it, and for the first time since walking out of that room, the corner of his mouth curved upward. Seeing that subtle connection between us broke Clara completely. She sprinted toward Mrs. Vance, crying hysterically. "Auntie Vance, say something. You know he loved me first." "My parents forced me to break it off." Mrs. Vance's shoulders trembled. Before she could open her mouth, Julian turned to his mother. "Mother, if this is how the Vance family repays unconditional loyalty, then we deserve to lose everything." The words landed like a heavy blow. Mrs. Vance swayed on her feet. "You asked Evelyn to sacrifice her life to save my standing," Julian continued coldly. "And the moment I recovered, you were ready to toss her aside for the woman who abandoned me." Tears spilled over Mrs. Vance's cheeks. I looked down, taking a deep breath. "Mrs. Vance, I understand you were terrified for Julian's future. But I was terrified too. Yet no one ever asked if I had anywhere left to go." Her face completely crumpled in regret. The neurologist cleared his throat carefully. "Mr. Vance's cognitive functions are fully restored. There are no remaining signs of memory loss." "Good," Julian replied smoothly. "Then everyone can stop pretending I don't know who my real wife is." Suddenly, a phone chimed, followed by another. Mrs. Vance's chief assistant rushed up the hallway, holding a tablet with a pale face. "Madam, news has just broken across all media outlets. Miss Clara's team officially announced her upcoming wedding to Mr. Vance." Clara's sobbing stopped instantly. Julian turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You leaked the wedding announcement to trap me?" Clara lifted her chin weakly. "The public already knows. Julian, if you reject me publicly now, the Vance family will suffer a massive PR disaster." A dark, dangerous smile spread across Julian's face. "You release the news first? Excellent. Then let's give the public a show they'll never forget." That evening, the Vance family hosted an emergency gala at their flagship hotel. The official invitation stated that Julian Vance had fully recovered and was making a public appearance to put an end to corporate instability. But the true purpose of the night was something far more decisive. My father and stepmother arrived early, beaming with unearned pride. The moment Clara's false media story had broken earlier that day, They had already envisioned themselves as in-laws to a multi-billion-dollar fortune. They strutted into the grand ballroom as though they were high society royalty rather than parents who had treated their eldest child like discarded garbage. When my stepmother spotted me standing near the VIP lounge, her eyes filled with familiar disdain. "Evelyn, don't you dare embarrass your sister tonight. Clara's future is what matters." I looked at her calmly. Her future? My stepmother leaned in, dropping her voice to a vicious whisper. "You were just a temporary stand-in. Don't get greedy." Beside the decorative pillar, Julian's shadow was practically fuming. "Temporary? I'm hiring 2 entire legal teams tomorrow just to tear your assets apart." My father stepped forward, offering a patronizing smile. "Evelyn, you've done a decent job looking after Julian, but Clara is simply better suited for a family of this stature. We'll ask Mrs. Vance to give you a nice cash bonus." A bonus, like tossing scraps to a stray dog that guarded the door. Before I could answer, Julian emerged from the private elevator in a tailored charcoal suit. He radiated absolute authority. My father's fake smile froze, and my stepmother's posture shifted instantly into desperate submissiveness. "Mr. Vance." Julian bypassed them completely, stopping right at my side. "Were they bothering you, Evelyn?" My father stammered, "And no, Mr. Vance. We were just catching up as a family." "Family?" Julian uttered a single word, cold enough to freeze the room. I stepped forward. They only remembered I was family once the cameras arrived. Julian's eyes hardened. He didn't need further explanation. By 8 o'clock, the ballroom was packed with board members, rival tech CEOs, investors, and high-profile journalists. Clara stood near the front of the stage in a stunning white designer gown, looking like a picture-perfect bride-to-be, her eyes artistically downturned to play the victim. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Isn't that the sister who took care of him?" I heard Clara was forced away by her family. Poor Clara, having her place temporarily taken. Julian walked onto the stage. Clara immediately took a step toward him, extending her hand. But Julian ignored her completely. Instead, he turned, looked down at me, and offered his hand. The hall went dead silent. He didn't pull me up, he waited patiently for my choice. That small gesture made my chest swell. I placed my hand in his, and he led me onto the main stage before the crowd. "Let me clarify the situation for the press," Julian's voice echoed powerfully through the microphone. "The woman who stood by me during my recovery is Evelyn. The woman I legal married is Evelyn. And she is the only wife I will ever acknowledge." Gasps erupted across the room. Clara went rigid. My stepmother's mouth fell wide open, and my father looked as though the ground had been ripped out from beneath his feet. Clara broke into frantic tears. "Julian, how can you do this to me? I only stepped back because my parents forced me. Evelyn stole my life." Julian turned toward my parents. "Is that true?" My stepmother opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Julian's smile was icy. "Careful. The Vance estate is monitored 24 hours a day. And my recovery suite had far more cameras than your story has truths." The massive LED screens behind the stage suddenly lit up, playing 3 crisp security recordings. The first clip played Clara's voice from the day of Julian's collapse. "Marry a child in a man's body? Absolutely not. I'd rather be bankrupt." The crowd gasped. The second clip showed Clara laughing mockingly outside my house, a weirdo and a man-child. What a match made in heaven. The third clip showed Clara slapping me in the estate garden. "Once his memory returns, you better pack your cheap bags and crawl back into the gutter." Next to the videos, the timeline of Clara's false press release was displayed alongside her complete absence during Julian's 3 months of intensive therapy. Julian looked down at Clara. "Which part of your undying love happened while I was incapacitated?" Clara's face turned completely ash gray. You recorded me?" "No," Julian replied calmly. "You were simply never important enough for my security team to turn the cameras off." A few executives in the front row burst out laughing. Beside the stage, Julian's shadow clapped its hands gleefully. Boom. Absolute poetry. Mrs. Vance stepped onto the stage, her voice trembling slightly into the microphone, but full of conviction. "During my son's recovery, Evelyn remained by his side day and night. She cared for him, read to him, followed every medical protocol, and protected our family's dignity when our rivals were waiting for us to collapse. Clara did not visit a single time until news of his recovery leaked. The head neurologist stepped forward next, confirming that Evelyn was the sole caretaker present throughout the rehabilitation process. Each statement landed like a sledgehammer against Clara's lies. Clara shook her head frantically, pointing at the staff. "They're all on your payroll. Of course they'll lie for you." Julian turned to me gently. "Evelyn, would you like to say something?" Every camera lens shifted toward me. My fingers tightened around Julian's, but I refused to shrink away. I looked Clara dead in the eye. "You called me an outcast my whole life," my voice rang out, clear and steady. "You turned everyone against me, mocked me when I worked evening shifts to pay for my university, and pushed me into this marriage when you thought Julian was broken. Now that he's back, you want to claim my sacrifice as your love." The ballroom was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Clara's lips trembled. "You always play the victim." "No," I replied, holding my head high. "I survived being your victim. There's a difference." My stepmother rushed toward the stage in a panic. "Enough, Evelyn. How dare you humiliate your sister in front of the whole world?" I turned my gaze toward her. "My sister? You only remembered I was your daughter when you thought my marriage could advance your social standing." My father stepped in, trying to save face. "Evelyn, watch your tone with your mother." "She is not my mother," I said firmly. Julian stepped in front of my father, his towering presence casting a long shadow over them both. "If Evelyn was your daughter, why did she have to work evening shifts to pay her own university tuition from age 15? My father's face flushed red as whispers swept through the crowd. She wanted independence." "And why did you claim she was born for servitude when you pushed her out your front door?" Julian pressed, as an audio recording from the day I left home played across the hall's sound system. My stepmother gasped, her face draining of all color. My father shrank back, utterly humiliated. Julian looked down at them with cold disgust. "The Vance Group does not do business with people who sell one daughter and exploit the other. As of tonight, all business ties, investments, and corporate partnerships with your firm are terminated immediately. Any attempt to harass Evelyn will be treated as a direct threat to my company." My father looked as if he might faint. That was the only language he understood, not fairness, not family, but money. Mrs. Vance stepped forward and bowed her head slightly toward me in front of every camera in the room. "Evelyn, I asked you to save my son, and I almost handed your place to the woman who abandoned him. That is my shame. From this day forward, you are the only daughter-in-law of the Vance family. The luxury penthouse and private super yacht are officially yours, and your standing here is absolute." Julian's shadow wiped away a fake tear. "Mrs. Vance, I forgive you. You pulled off a great save." Clara broke down completely, screaming and sobbing hysterically as security guards escorted her, my father, and my stepmother out of the building. By the next morning, news of the gala had completely shattered my former family's reputation. Clara's social network crumbled overnight, her high society friends stopped calling, and her public image was permanently ruined. My father's firm lost 3 major clients within 48 hours, leaving his business on the brink of collapse. My stepmother sent me desperate text messages calling me her precious eldest daughter, but I simply blocked her number without replying. They even tried waiting outside the estate gates for hours, but the security detail turned them away every single time. That evening, as I was sitting in our private suite, packing a small bag out of old habit, Julian walked into the room. He stopped near the doorway, resting his hand against the frame. "May I come in?" he asked gently. I looked at him, surprised. Here was one of the most powerful men in the city, asking for permission to enter his own room. His shadow, leaning against the wall, whispered, "Look at me." Respectful, mature, husband material. I stifled a small laugh and nodded. "Of course." Julian walked in, his eyes falling on the open suitcase. A flicker of worry crossed his features. "If you want your own space or freedom, I will ensure you are protected wherever you choose to go. But if you choose to stay, I promise no one will ever treat you like a substitute again." I paused, holding a folded sweater. Are you offering me all of this just out of gratitude? I am grateful, Julian said, stepping closer, keeping a respectful distance. But gratitude isn't a marriage. When I was helpless, you didn't care about my wealth or power, you just cared for me. Now that I have my strength back, I choose you, not out of obligation, but because you are the only person who is real with me. He placed a thick leather folder on the desk. Inside were the deeds to the penthouse, the super yacht, and a multi-million-dollar independent trust fund registered under my name alone. These belong to you regardless of whether you stay or leave, Julian added softly. I want to make sure you never have to stay anywhere just because you have nowhere else to go. Tears welled up in my eyes. For my entire life, people had given me conditions: serve, endure, step aside, be grateful, be quiet. But Julian was giving me complete choice. There's something I need to tell you. I wiped a tear away and looked him in the eye. I can hear the inner thoughts of people's shadows. I've been able to since I was a child. The room fell into silence. Julian looked down at his shadow on the polished floor. His shadow instantly froze into a rigid posture. Act normal. Be mysterious. I bit my lip to keep from laughing aloud. Julian's mouth curved into a warm, genuine smile. So that's how you always knew what I was thinking. Your shadow talked a lot, I admitted. The shadow gasped dramatically. Betrayal. Julian chuckled, stepping forward and taking my hand gently into his. Then I suppose I owe you a lifetime of honesty to make up for it. He looked at me with deep respect. The world called you an outcast because they couldn't stand someone who saw right through their pretenses. But to me, you're the only person who brought light into my life. 3 months later, we hosted a private, breathtaking wedding by the ocean. There were no fake smiles, no reporters, and no toxic family members present. I wore a simple, elegant gown, and as I walked down the aisle toward Julian, his shadow was standing tall beside him, virtually beaming with pride. When we exchanged our vows, Julian held my hand firmly. I was abandoned when I was weak, but Evelyn stayed. From this day forward, her choices are my priority, and her happiness is my home. When it was my turn, I looked into his eyes. I didn't choose you because of your shadow or your wealth or because I needed an escape. I chose you because you waited for me to make my own choice. Behind us, the gentle crash of the waves filled the air. We eventually spent our honeymoon on the super yacht, floating across the open blue sea. For the first time in my life, silence didn't feel like isolation. It felt like absolute peace. Clara once mocked us as a weirdo and a man-child, claiming we were a match made in heaven. She was right about one thing: we were a perfect match. I could hear the shadows in the dark, and Julian became the man who stepped out of the darkness to stand by my side in the light.